God, poor connection. Um, can everyone see and hear me? I am going live with Kirstin Chen. Hang on, I'm gonna see if I can add Kirstin. I have the usual problem where my internet's being funky again, so if
Hi.
Hello. Oh, that
How?
was pretty painless.
I know, so far so good. I mean, we say that and then watch. It's my internet's gonna like explode.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you? Can you hear and see
Oh
me okay?
no.
Oh, can you see me?
I can. Yes. It just kind of froze for a second, but
Okay, let me know and I'm gonna move rooms if that's the case. I can run downstairs really fast. I have the worst internet, so I'm so sorry.
a lovely scenic background though, and that counts for a lot.
I'll distract with my background. Well, thank you so much for joining today. This is such a treat. I'm not, this is not, no word of a lie. I read your book, Counterfeit, within a few hours.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
I could not put it down. And I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but I found it totally relatable. Um, uh, and it's such a fun page turner. I mean, every single page I couldn't wait to get through to see, how these two women get through, this wild adventure, which we'll jump into. But I just want to say thank you so much for writing such a fantastic story. It's so fun, and I think it's a perfect fit for summer.
Oh,
So
thank you so much. I'm so thrilled and honored to be a part of your book club. I've been following along and I know you have such great
oh,
taste, and so it's an honor for me.
oh my gosh, no, the honor is mine. So I'm so thankful. So I want to jump in. I'm sorry, I have my notes here. Because I want to talk about what prompted this story and how did the ideas start flowing and forming, and why this story.
Yes, no, it's a question I get a lot because it's such a random seeming topic. So for
Yes.
those of your viewers who haven't yet read the book, it's centered on these two Asian American women who build a counterfeit handbag scheme into a global enterprise, shattering the model minority myth along the way. And the book actually, the idea for the book actually kind of started as a joke. A couple of years ago, I was working on my last novel, which is a really different book. It's historical fiction. It's set in 1950s Maoist China, and it's a book that required an incredible amount of research. And I remember after like a particularly trying day, I turned to my partner and I said, like, listen, the next book I write is going to require zero research, and it's going to have to be about the only topic I already know about, and that's handbags. And I actually am like,
Love
I
it.
am like I've always been a lover of fashion. I have like a deep love for designer handbags. And so I kind of said it as a joke. But then a couple weeks after that, I came across a news article in the Washington Post that detailed a real life con artist who had this perfect scheme, which I borrowed for the book. So that
Uh-huh.
scheme is from real life. And it was so good that when I read that article, I was like, oh, this belongs in a novel. And that ended up becoming Counterfeit. And then, of course, it required a lot of research because I didn't know anything about the counterfeit handbag
Yeah.
industry. But yeah, it's funny where I've like as I've been a novelist for several years now through three books, I realize like so much of it is just paying attention to good ideas because you just never
Yeah.
know, where you're going to get them.
No, absolutely. And what sparks that, and what fuels you and to drive that book, I'm sure, because then you get much more excited about it. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
and I mean, I love fashion too. And I have a girlfriend of mine, and she has, like, we were discussing counterfeits because we were sort of discussing it. And funny enough, she gave me a counterfeit bag, which, sorry to say, but when my husband and I just traveled and I started taking picture of this girl because she had the exact same bag. and I didn't know, I couldn't tell if it was real or fake. So I was texting my friend and I'm like, is this real? And Jared was like, should I ask? My husband's like, should I ask her? And I was like, no, don't. But it's such a wild, it's such an interesting business. There's also that article in The Cut recently. I don't know if you read that one too, which was like,
I did. Everybody
oh
sent it to me.
oh, sorry. I'm sure. Like, you have your finger on the pulse. It's such a wild industry, and I love how you really flipped it on its head. And I don't want to get too far ahead, so I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead. So I'll go back to I have my notes to keep me on track here. So Counterfeit focuses on two women. Ava, a lawyer who has stopped working, narrates her son Henry, and Winnie, a former Stanford classmates of Ava's from mainland China, who enlist her in a scheme to sell high-end counterfeit bags. I love both of these characters so very much. Which one for you was your favorite to write, do you think?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. People often ask, like, which is your favorite character, not which is your favorite to write, which is very different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I really love both of these characters too. So I'm glad to hear you did. I would say that Winnie's sections were probably the most fun to write. As you know, the majority of the book is Ava's confession to a detective. And Winnie is kind of in many ways the opposite of Ava. She's really bold and she's decisive. She kind of marches to the beat of her own drum. And it was really fun to write a character with that kind of confidence and kind of almost brashness. She's like,
yes.
Screw you, I don't care what people think. And that was really fun to write.
Oh, absolutely. Well, so that being said, writing for them, did you have a favorite character that you love more?
Not really. I mean, I think that with both of these characters, I think I put a little bit of they're both really different from who I am, but I put a little bit of myself into each of them. And so I could really relate to both of them in a really deep way. With Ava, I myself am a Stanford grad. I know the pressures of being a model minority, of following the rules, of looking a certain way. But on the other hand, I grew up in Singapore, so I didn't grow up in the US. And so I have the experience of coming from a country where everybody looks like me and everybody talks like me. And that gives you a sense of security that an immigrant to the US maybe never gets a chance to feel. And so I could really tap into that in Winnie's character, the way that she just is like, if it doesn't work out here, I'll go home. It's fine. That kind of attitude. And so I think because I could I had such a deep understanding of both of them in that way. They're probably two of the characters that I think most fondly of.
Yeah, I love that you say that you put both, you understand a little bit of both. And I feel too that I felt myself really rooting for both of them at different times because they were I could really empathize and feel what they were going through. And I think that is a testament to your writing style and really allowing the reader to go along with their journeys, because they are quite dramatic journeys that they go through. And they're not always on paper ethical
yes
choices.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the page turning keeps coming in, because you're like, would I make that decision? Would I not? And I totally get it. And it was there. I really loved both of them. I also I recently we were just traveling, and I always save my book reviews from the New York Times, and I was so excited to come back and see your book was in the New York Times book review, which congratulations. That is so cool. And they wrote such an amazing review, which and they had this, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that's so many great points. So I'm excited to even go back and read it again, knowing, from their perspective. Congratulations. That was really cool.
Thank you. I mean, it's a review that I will treasure my entire career. It's just like, it is such a privilege when somebody really gets what you're trying to do. And so I will remember it always. Thank you for reading it. I'm glad.
Oh my gosh, no, I was like, yeah, that's so cool. And they say in the New York, I'm quoting the New York Times, so they say it's an entertaining, luxurious read, but beneath it's glitz and flash. It is also a shrewd deconstruction of the American dream and the myth of the model minority. I wanted to know, first of all, do you agree with that? And secondly, if so, why did you want to focus on the myth of the model minority?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was always the heart of the book for me, was my quest was always to deconstruct the model minority myth, which is funny to say because there's so many other things going on in the book.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to an editor early on when we were still submitting the book for publication, and one of the editors described it as a Trojan horse of a novel, and it's a description that really resonated with me because there's all this kind of shiny, flashy things going on.
Yeah.
There's a crime, there's a big major heist, there's like all of this stuff going on, but the heart of the book for me was always like looking at what it means to be Asian American in this country. And I think the reason that idea was always in my head is to go back to that Washington Post article that I mentioned that was the inspiration for this book. The real life con artist, I kid you not, was an Asian female preschool teacher.
Oh my gosh.
And I read that detail and I thought, of course she was incredibly successful, because she's the antithesis of what we picture a criminal to be.
Yeah.
And so that was the first thing that kind of sparked. I was like, right, she was hiding in plain sight because of her, her skin color or her job. But then the other salient detail was that right after she served her sentence, she ended up going to jail. She was immediately deported back to Thailand because she was an immigrant from Thailand. And so that to me, exactly, those details, that to me was the model minority myth writ large. It's, we hold up a particular group of people, society at large holds up a particular group of people as exemplary when it's useful to us. And then the instant they no longer serve that purpose, we get rid of them, and it's easy to kind of dispose of them. And I sort of think that dichotomy that struck me and was always what I wanted to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the fact that it's such a great story in general, but then on top of it, you have all of that woven in. And I think that makes it all the more like juicy and intelligent and fun because it's multi-layered. And those are the books that are these gems that are just so wonderful. It's so fantastic. It's interesting that even Ava has certain prejudices like towards Winnie, even in the beginning when she's, when Winnie is leaving school and such, and they all had their own collective idea of what happened. It's
yes,
wild.
yes. I
and
think
reflective.
We kind of look at Asian Americans as a kind of monolith, and that was another one of the things that I wanted to explore was, there are many, like Winnie's from mainland China, and Asian Americans have preconceived notions about that, and there's even internally there are all these prejudices.
Yeah, absolutely. And I ended up actually, sometimes it depends on certain books I like to listen, and certain books I like to read, and I actually went back and listened to your book as well because I read it so quickly, and then I was like, I bet I'm missing some things. So I went back and listened to it, which was also informative too, because because of the language can be very sing-songy. I found that like really helpful, like even in Ava's perspective and how she feels about Winnie. Listening to it was kind of like closing your eyes and just sort of inserting yourself of how we can have preconceived notions and I don't know, it was just very helpful, I think, like listening to her journey as well. I don't know if you enjoy listening to Audible or script, there's so many different platforms, but do you enjoy listening or do you read, or what's your kind of...
I'm like an old school, like hardcover, like I rarely use my Kindle, but I do love audiobooks, especially for nonfiction when you have the author, oftentimes the narrator is the author. I find that incredible. I do love the narrator of my book, Catherine Ho, who's done amazing. Yeah. I've listened to a couple of her books, and especially because I found out she was going to be doing mine. And I get I get so many tips on how to read my own work from listening to the audiobooks because they're professionals and they're just, they're actors. And it's amazing to hear. And I love her work.
Yeah, no, she's and it was helpful for me because I was like, to listen to the language was very helpful. And I absolutely, if you've bought the book, please go buy the book. But also, it's a great way to listen to. Like, it was just a very wonderful read, so I really enjoyed that too. So I want to go back a bit about your research, because you were talking about the research. I saw that you received a research grant that enabled you to visit famous fake handbag markets in Hong Kong and other places. So I want to know what that was like. Was it crazy? Was it scary? Like, I want to know all about it.
Yeah, no, it was incredible. I mean, I could not have written the book without going to Guangzhou and to Hong Kong and seeing things firsthand. I mean, I think the most striking thing was just how normal it was. Like, it is a giant shopping mall. Like, it's clean, it's air conditioned, like all this illegal merchandise is like sold out in the open in boutiques that look like some of them look like high-end boutiques. I mean, it's all out in the open. I think that was the most striking thing for a Westerner who, you know, isn't accustomed to this stuff. But like, the detail that I'll never forget is that I show up at this shopping center and I know that it's filled with illegal merchandise. And right outside the shopping center is this makeshift police kiosk. And there's like a policeman smoking a cigarette outside of the kiosk. And that to me was the image that kind of captured what I was trying to do in this book, like the paradox of illegal and legal coexisting side by side, like the complications of that, and just how things are. It's not easy to simplify and flatten an industry like this. It's a complicated thing. You know, on the one hand, it's completely illegal. On the other hand, it is a huge driver of the economy in this particular city, and hundreds and thousands of hardworking people make their living from it. You know, like it's complicated, I think that image kind of was something that stuck with me as through the many drafts that I wrote of this book.
Yeah, and I love this, like, sort of, I don't know how this conundrum of big businesses sort of exploiting workers, but then, you know, the exploitation of these bags, and it's kind of like it brings up a lot of questions, and, you know, that arise. It's wild. And then on top of it, to have some of the manufacturers also making the fakes, and
that part I fictionalized just to be.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've heard
Yes.
from friends of mine who are creatives and who do make their own luxury goods. It brings up the question arises of what is luxury.
Right,
you know?
Absolutely, and it is plausible. It's absolutely plausible. But I
Sorry, I didn't
be clear. No,
Yeah.
that I didn't visit a factory that did that. But it is plausible that would happen. But I mean, I think even the luxury goods industry in China is like a huge paradox in and of itself, because it's the biggest market for luxury goods, but also the biggest biggest counterfeit producer. And so the fact that it's both the biggest market for luxury goods and the biggest producer of counterfeits is in and of itself a paradox, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So also I want to go back earlier when we were talking about Ava and Winnie and the structure a little bit, because I found it really interesting that part one is told mainly through Ava's perspective, almost like a monologue, and it's very one-sided also, which was really interesting. And then you go to Winnie, and then you go back and revealing, you know, a lot of information. What made you decide to structure the book this way, or your story this way?
Yeah. You know, when I first started writing this book, I tried to write the entire thing as a confession. I envisioned the whole thing as a monologue, because I thought it was like a very elegant kind of streamlined structure. And I very quickly realized the limitations of that. Like, I could not show the nuances of Ava's unreliability. Like, I couldn't show when she was telling the truth. I couldn't show when she was exaggerating or when she was flat out lying. Like, none of that would be able to come through if it was just a confession. Yeah. And so that's when I figured out that, okay, there needs to be a kind of story of record. There has to be a way for readers to know what the truth is. And so then you have to bring in another voice. And so that was when I brought in Winnie's sections. And then even after that, I had to figure out when in the book to bring it in, like how much do we need to hear from Winnie? That was kind of, you know, I wrote probably 14 full drafts of this book, and the last like 8 or 9 was all just like how to figure out how to incorporate Winnie. because Ava's voice was always so clear to me, and I always knew what her agenda was, and so her section was actually from start to finish stayed pretty much the same. And then I love that you mentioned that it's very one-sided. The fact that Ava's confessing to a detective, but you don't ever really hear the detective. And I had a lot of fun with that too. I remember reading a crime writer, a great crime writer, Richard Price, who wrote for The Wire. So he's obviously an expert at this. And I remember reading one of his books, and the detective says to their partner, the detective says, we're just going to let them talk, because they're going to talk. They were going to let the suspect talk themselves into a mistake. And I was like, that's such an interesting strategy. So they would just, every day, the suspect would come and they would say, tell us the story again. Tell us the story again in more detail. And it was the repetition that trips up the suspect.
Interesting.
And so I thought about that, and I was like, right, of course, she just wants Ava to tell her story, and she's going to catch her in a lie. And whether that happens, those of you who haven't read the book, please pick it up, and you'll figure it out. But that was kind of what I was thinking with that one-sided writing.
That's incredible. Well, and at first I was like, okay, because it was testing, like, there's so many different ideas. That, first of all, that the fact that she is a minority in America, and it's like you only see it through a certain lens, and then you go like, well, maybe she's not telling, like, this is her side, and then there's three sides, right? There's her side, Winnie's side, and then the story which unfolds. So there's like so much peppering of like, who did it, what's happening, is this the truth? It's like, that's what makes it so rich and so fun and so fascinating. Is I absolutely love that. And I love that idea of that they just keep talking, because she does, and she keeps like, she'll ask questions like, what I'm talking about, and then continue on, and it's like she's digging a hole for herself too.
Yes.
Like, stop. It's so fun. So Ava, going back to Ava, Ava, first of all, I really relate to her. I mean, that's quite honestly, not that I'm, doing any counterfeiting per se, but I'm a mom, and I have 3 kids, and I had a career, and I stopped to be a mom, and there's a lot of, frustration that comes with that, and I mean, having a family is wonderful, but like this feeling that Ava seems to have of trying to find her footing and her place, and feel like she's making a difference in the way that she feels proud of. Not that you can't be, it's they're not one and the same. So I really understood, and I also, the dynamic with her son, like that, then the family dynamics with her husband, and working all the time, and having a child that she feels is very challenging at times. So, and he seemed a little very, very challenging at times for her. So I was wondering, was that played up for for the story purposes, or was this based off of a challenging child in your life, or how did you go about writing Henry the way that you wrote him?
Yeah, no, it started as something to serve the story. I was thinking of Ava as this character who is in complete control of every aspect of her life, right? She's in control of how she looks. She's in control of her job. She's in control of who she married. She's even in control of her emotions, because she's done it for so long. Like, she's just like perfectly in control of everything. And I thought, what is the one thing that she can't control? And that's, of course, a child. And I myself am not a parent, but all of my, I'm very fortunate that all my first readers are parents, and all my friends who are parents tell me that even when your child is a few months old, they have a distinct personality, and you cannot, like, they're a fully formed human being from the very beginning. And that was what I was thinking about, was that, the one thing she cannot control is this little boy, because he's not going to follow her agenda, right? He's his whole self. And then I will say that I think, maybe because I'm not myself a parent, in early drafts, I don't think I managed to make Henry a full character. And I'm fortunate that many of my first readers gave me advice on, I remember one of my first trusted readers, another author named Vanessa Hua, she read my draft and she said, Kirstin, even the most difficult children have moments of sweetness. And I thought, oh, you're right. Like, and that to me was like, he's a device. And in the early drafts, he was a device. He was just there to serve a purpose, which was to show the change in Ava's character. And then with
he anchors her too.
Yeah, exactly. He's an obstacle and an anchor, but he wasn't yet a human being. And so it took several drafts to kind of really think about, just think about him like any other character who has his own motivations and his own desires and his own sense of who he is. And I hope I achieved, like I tried hard to make him like a fully formed, fleshed out character.
Oh no, he was fantastic. I mean, I would have assumed that you were a parent. I think he was, if the family dynamics are, they were very clear. And I think that I would imagine that most parents and most mothers sort of find themselves in that predicament at times, where you have this fully formed life and you have this plan for yourself. And then, you've worked so hard we've worked so hard to achieve somewhat of equality. And then like life throws, with children, you get thrown a curveball and it's a very wonderful experience, but sometimes it's very demoralizing at times and hard. And I think you captured a lot of those moments. And I think it was a perfect crossroads to start the story.
Oh, thank you.
So.
Yeah, I think I'm theorizing that, like, I think because I myself am not a parent, like, I think that outsider perspective is sometimes helpful when you're a writer, because I think you're able to observe things that, like, I can imagine a mother saying, I don't want to whine. Like, I don't want to be like a complainer, but I'm not a parent. And so I could say like, well, I'm happy to voice this, ambivalence, and to voice these concerns that, because I don't feel like it's personal in the same way, maybe. Yeah.
Well, it was fantastic. It was great. There were times I was like, yes, I totally get it. This is such a beautiful book, and is it your third novel?
It's my third
correct?
Novel.
And named a Reese Witherspoon pick, which is like also a huge deal. And like, I know that I've seen her blasting it and like just praising and singing you praises all left and right. Like, it's so cool. I'm so excited for you. Since you have since this is your third novel and you've done this before, does this feel different now? Like, with all the did you have this experience when you first started? How is this different, I guess, than your first launch or your first book or your second book?
Yeah, very different. Very different. I mean, this book has reached a far wider audience than either of my previous books, my first two books. But I'm actually really grateful that it happened with my third book, because I think I have a perspective that I wouldn't have had if this was my debut. What I've tried to remember through this whole process is that I was so lucky to have the career I had, but I felt so like I remember when I published my second book, Bury What We Cannot Take, and I remember thinking to myself, like, you get to write books that people will read. Like, that is incredible. And, that hasn't changed. And that's kind of something that I've sort of tried, like, that is fundamentally the same job. And your happiness does not increase because you have more readers, like, fundamentally, like, I do this because I want to write. And so I'm grateful to have that perspective. I think I would have been much more overwhelmed if this were my debut. I mean, it would have been amazing if this were my debut, if this was how I started my career. But, I think, like, careers are long. You're only as good as your last book. I don't have that kind of, I don't think I feel the same kind of pressure that I might if it were my first book, because I know what it is to have a long career. I know what it is to have to dig. I know how it is to not make a huge splash with a book. It wasn't that bad. It was still, good. I still appreciated my career. And so I'm going to try to hold on to that going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's a huge accomplishment to publish a book and to even put, pen to paper and, within 3 novels to be where you are now. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment. So kudos to you. And did I read that you're also a professor at USF?
Oh, yes. I teach part-time at the University of San Francisco.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, I love teaching creative writing.
Yeah.
I think that when you're a writer who hangs out mostly with other writers, I imagine it's the same for actors. Like, you get very jaded because everybody's kind of achieving and like, like, oh yeah, I got this review, but they got that review. Like, it's easy to kind of just forget that that we're so lucky to have our job. But when I teach students, they're like, oh my goodness, you wrote a book, like they're excited in a way that I'm not anymore. And so I appreciate that. Like, they kind of keep, give you that perspective that, how lucky you are to be an artist, how lucky you are to read and write for a living,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I also think it's amazing that you're able to teach and hustle and, publish a book the way you're publishing a book. That's amazing.
I'm a very slow writer. It takes me about 5 years for each book. So, I mean, that's part of it, is that I don't write that quickly.
No one needs to know any of it still. That's still like a huge accomplishment. So don't undersell yourself. That's a huge accomplishment. So what can we expect? What other books are you working on? We need some more. We need some more Kirstin Chen.
I'm slowly, 5 years from now, you may see another one. I'm working on a very different novel. It's set in the dirty, cutthroat world of pediatric cancer research.
Really?
And it's set at an elite cancer lab at a Harvard-like institution. I describe it as Succession, but with nerds.
Love it. That's awesome. And you're planning it out right now? You're in the middle of writing it, or?
I've just started. I mean, I've been kicking the idea around for a couple of years, which is kind of how I know when an idea is going to work, is if it just doesn't leave me, And so I've been like kicking the idea around. I just started writing. It's early stages, so yeah. I think it'll be.
Well, now you need to write it.
Yeah,
now you need to do it. You've publicly said it, so now you need to do it. And then Counterfeit, I don't even know if you can say, but if you can, are you going to translate this onto the big screen at all? Because if not, you need to make this into a movie. It's way too good.
Yeah, no, so it has been optioned.
Awesome.
For TV, most likely.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we were so lucky. I mean, it got optioned I had just sold the book in November 2020, and it got optioned shortly after, so way before all of this happened. But as you know, I mean, it's everything is secret and everything is very slow, is what I can do.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned about Hollywood.
Yeah. It's super slow, and then all of a sudden it's like a mad race, and you're like, no.
Yeah, and it's interesting for me because as a writer, you are like the god of your kingdom, right? Like, everything goes through, like, it's my world. And with a TV show, it seems like there are 1,000 people involved, and they're all changing at every moment.
Yes, I think that everyone sort of just wants to justify their job and their title, because it's like, we want that table and that scene to be green, and you're like, okay, that's not, So I think everyone wants to be able to like put their creative input, and I'm sure as a writer, you're like, wait, what? Why are you spending time on this?
I so admire the resilience. I mean, you tell me, like, as a writer, if a publisher buys my book, I don't know how much publicity we'll get. I don't know how many marketing dollars we'll get, but I know there will be a book at the end of the road. Yeah. And with a TV show, I mean, like, how do you deal with that? I mean, I know it's part of your job, but it's just like I had a writer say to me, nothing is certain until you see the show on your screen.
I know. It's kind of true. It's kind of true. Like, just, my husband is now, he was on a show Supernatural. Now he's on a show Walker, and watching him and sort of sitting, pseudo producing with him, but he's obviously the one really doing it. But I just watching him and learning from him, and there are certain projects that are like, yes, and they are like fast tracked. And then some projects that take, it seems like everyone's on board and it's happening, and then it's like crickets, like, oh well, this exec's not there anymore, this person, and you're like, wait, we've just spent how much time, like, and then you, like, for me, I get so butthurt because I've like precast it in my mind, and then like,
I was
no
gonna
one's
ask,
available.
you just like have a very zen attitude where you're like, I'm not even, you know, like not.
I mean, I take a lot of ice baths. I don't know. I mean, I just, well, I get so, he's so good at being chill where I get like, wait, what? You know, because you're like, you're saying, there's so many people involved in the whole creative process. I think being zen, you have to sort of be a bit zen about it. It's kind of crazy, but yeah.
I've only had a little peek into it, but that is the sense I get.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I just so admire writing and being a writer, and I just think being in charge of your work and your creativity and then watching it come to fruition, to me, I'm just so in awe of, and I love it so much. And my sister, funny enough, she's not currently at the moment, but she was at UCF or USF last year, and then she has to Zoom. She had a really bad brain injury, and so for her, she has to do some Zooming now. But she was taking classes at USF and absolutely loved the creative writing program.
Oh, she was taking creative writing classes?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I was just telling her that I was going to be chatting with you, and she's like, oh my gosh, I love her book. Let her know. So,
oh, that's lovely.
But yeah, and I know that we're running out of time, and I don't want to take up all your time, but if there are maybe a couple questions from the audience, if anyone has some questions. I heard someone wrote and asked if how you prepare for all your books, whether or not is that the same for all of them, or do you handle each one individually? Are they all different?
How do I write them?
Sorry, how do you prepare, I think is what I'm trying to find the question, but I believe it was, how do you prepare for each story or each book?
That's interesting. I mean, I actually have a very rigid writing process
Really?
that is really not romantic at all, and so I always hesitate to share this even with my students, but I'm one of those people that writes at in complete silence at the same time. I live like a monastic life when I'm writing.
Awesome.
I try to draft 1,000 words a day when I'm drafting, and I send them to my first reader, a wonderful writer named Matthew Salisis, by email, and he sends me his 1,000 words by email, and we give each other a thumbs up or a thumbs down, no comments, like just, the bare minimum. Thumbs up means keep writing. Thumbs down means go back and revise. And I've drafted all 3 of my books that way, in those 1,000-word chunks.
That's
and
so cool.
I try very hard not to like fixate on inspiration, or, like I try to treat it like a craft, like scales, or like, something that, or like working out, like lifting weights, like something that you just have to do every day to develop muscle memory. And it's been the same for all 3 of my books, and I think it will be the same for the 4th.
That's amazing. I've actually I've heard that from other authors about having that structure, and I was just talking to an author who was saying similarly, where they write, I think, 1,000 words. I don't think it was Casey McQuiston, but someone was just telling me that they do that, like 1,000 words every day, and then toss out whatever they don't need, and have writing partners, and it's so interesting. I feel
like it just kind of takes the stakes away, like if you know you're going to do it again tomorrow, you don't have to write the best 1,000 words, you just have to write 8,000 words.
That's awesome. And I bet, like, I mean, obviously you're incredibly talented, but someone like who's starting out, I'm sure that's a wonderful practice, because you're only going to get better.
Yeah, I think of that too, like scales. You have to play the scales to play the concerto or whatever the metaphor is.
That's amazing. What books are you reading right now?
Oh, I always love that question. I'm reading a lot of books that are coming out next year, because people send me now. That's a nice perk. You get sent books.
You're so lucky.
Yes. And so I don't want to recommend those. So I'm going to recommend a book that I read recently that is already out. It's Either or by Elif Batuman, which I'm sure people have heard of because it was a New York Times bestseller. It's follows a kind of bumbling Harvard sophomore on campus who's just kind of like meandering her way through her college career. I have a soft spot for campus tales. And so if you do too, you might check this book out.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I definitely will. And one more, which I love, this is a good one, since you're such a fashionista.
Oh.
What does your purse collection look like now after all your research?
Oh, I did not buy any bags for research. I don't think it would have I could have justified that cost. But as a lifelong handbag lover, I do have a lot of handbags in my collection. I would say my most special bag is a Chanel sequined flap bag that I inherited from my grandma, and she passed away in 2019. And if you pick up the book, you'll see that it's dedicated to my grandmother. And I kind of think of her as being the original fashionista who instilled my appreciation of handbags in me. And so it was nice to think about her as I was writing this book.
That's so sweet. I love that. I have a perfume, I think it's like an old perfume bag or something. It's Gucci, and it's like it must have held perfume or something, because I think it says like Gucci perfume, but it looks like a clutch. My grandmother gave me. It's not as cool as a Chanel sequin bag, but I love that. That's so cool.
It is. Yeah. I think it's sentimental. Yeah, exactly.
And I'll ask one more question, because I think this one is a cool one. Are there any authors or writers that inspire you?
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, especially with this book, when I was thinking about the model minority myth, I think like there have been so many prominent, extremely brilliant Asian American writers who have been writing in the last couple of years. I'm thinking of Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu, which is set in a kind of, the whole book is set on a kind of Law and Order set, a Law and Order type set. It's very experimental and very fun. He's a TV writer who also wrote for Westworld, so he's an insider. Cool. Yeah, it's a really cool book. There's a book called Chemistry by Weike Wang, which I really love. Fiona and Jane, a new short story collection by Jean Chen Ho. I mean, I've been inspired by a lot of, obviously I'm inspired by many, many other authors, but these are a few that I feel like my book is kind of in conversation with.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I want to just say thank you so much. For people who have joined midway through, we are talking to Kirstin Chen. This is Counterfeit, her newest book. Please, please, please go pick it up. You will not regret it. It is certainly one of my favorite reads. I literally read this within like, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 hours. I couldn't put it down. It is so good. A page turner. So fun, such a fun caper. I'm so grateful to be chatting with you, and thank you for taking your time and chatting with me and everyone.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Somebody wrote in the comments that it was like watching a FaceTime call, and I hope that's a compliment, but I feel that way because you're so easy to talk to.
Oh, so are you. I'm just so, honestly, I hope we can be friends.
Yes, likewise.
I'm in the Bay Area, so I'll
Oh, you are? Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, not currently, but my family's from Danville. So.
Oh my gosh, we'll chat some more offline.
Yes.
So nice to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.